A few weeks ago, we took a look at how to use an E61 group espresso machine equipped with flow control to dramatically improve the flavor of a fresh from roast, high-altitude, single-origin specialty coffee. Today, more ways to use flow control to get more from your espresso machine. Hey, espresso lovers, Mark here from Whole Latte Love with 5 specific flow profiles to improve your espresso and expand the capabilities of your machine. I'll have basic approaches for various situations. In this video, we'll recap a profile for fresh and lighter roast specialty coffees, take a look at a profile for less than fresh darker roasts and bean blends, how to use flow control to make coffee shots or drip style coffee. I'll have a sweet bump profile for pulling out fruit and berry flavors, and cover a profile which mimics manual lever shots. For each of the 5 profiles, I'll have a graph showing valve position over time during extraction, which you can use as a starting point. For demonstration, I'm using a Profitec Pro 700. It's one of my favorite plumbable dual boiler machines, featuring best-in-class steaming power, shot timer, and of course that flow control. In addition to the Pro 700, flow control is available on Profitec's Pro 500 PID heat exchange boiler machine, the Pro 600 compact dual boiler, and ECM's Classica single boiler PID machine, as well as ECM's dual boiler Synchronica. All of those machines come with the group-mounted brew pressure gauge if equipped with flow control. Before we get into the profiles, let's quickly go over how to calibrate and know what your flow rates are. So this is the control for flow rate. As you open it, flow rate increases. To calibrate, measure how much water comes out at each quarter turn of the valve. So open the valve 1 quarter turn, raise the lever to turn on the pump, and measure how much water comes out in 20 seconds. Then divide that by 20 to get the flow rate. Now, the most accurate method is to weigh the water. If you don't have a scale, no problem. You can measure it in milliliters, as 1 milliliter of water weighs 1 gram. So get your total weight or volume and divide by 20 to get grams per second of flow. Repeat this for each quarter turn of the valve. A couple of notes on flow. First, it will not be identical machine to machine. There are differences based on pump type, whether your machine is plumbed direct to waterline or operating from a reservoir. Also know that with the flow control wide open, flow rate may be much higher than in the same machine equipped with a stock E61 mushroom valve. So here are my results for each quarter turn opening the valve. Again, yours will likely be different depending on your machine and pump type and your water source. So do the calibration and get to know your machine's flow rates. With that, let's get into using flow to improve espresso and expand your machine's capabilities. A fairly well-known way of working with extra fresh and lighter roast coffees are long, low-flow pre-infusions before ramping up to a medium flow to finish the shot. It's what we did a few weeks back to control the brightness of a 7-day from roast Ethiopian Yirgacheffe coffee in a technical video comparing flavor to the same coffee pulled without flow control. If you missed that video, you can use a link up here or down in the description. Now, it was great to hear from viewers like Mario in the comments who were able to get similar results using flow control on their machine. So here's a graph of that flow profile. It starts with the flow valve open a quarter turn. At 15 seconds, I'm going to open the valve another quarter turn just as coffee is starting to come through the basket and finish the shot with that flow. So here's the shot using that profile. I start with the valve open a quarter turn and let that run at that position for about 15 seconds. As we get close to 15 seconds, you'll see the gauge starting to register a little pressure. At 15 seconds, espresso starts coming through the basket, and I open another quarter turn. As the extraction continues, pressure slowly builds to about 6 bar in the group. Now look close and you'll see the pressure drop a bit as solids are pulled from the coffee, but flow remains the same. I stopped the shot at a 42 gram yield for a 1:2 ratio from my 21 gram dose. So Todd and I tasted the shot, and there was a real difference compared to a shot without flow control we did earlier in the video. The brightness typically in a very fresh coffee was toned way down, and the fruit flavors were more pronounced. So here's a last look at that profile graph. Very simple, 15 seconds at a quarter turn, then open to a half turn until reaching the 1:2 ratio. Now, these profiles are just a starting point, so you may need to adjust depending on your grind and other factors. One easy way to work this one is to use a bottomless portafilter and increase the flow as espresso starts to come through the filter basket. So what if you're working with a coffee that's maybe not so fresh, or perhaps it's a dark roast or bean blend that does not depend on freshness for making a classic espresso? Here's a flow profile to try which can reduce bitterness and avoid bringing out stale flavors. In some ways, it's about the opposite of what you do with a very fresh coffee. We'll hit the coffee with a high flow rate for about 15 seconds and then gently ramp down the flow until the end of the shot. The initial high flow rate and corresponding pressure aids in crema production and pulls out the flavors we want, while the reduction in flow to finish reduces bitterness from over extraction and prevents the extraction of stale flavors. For this and the remaining three profiles, I'll be using Maroma's Orfea coffee. It's an Italian-style bean blend I like a lot and make both as espresso and long coffee. I'm very familiar with its flavors, so I'll be able to get a sense how it presents using the different profiles. Here's the profile in action. I'll start with my flow control open 1 1/4 turns, lift the lever to turn the pump on. I'll let it run like this for 15 seconds. Notice the quick rise to full brew pressure due to high flow rate and the rotary pump in the Pro 700. Now, first drip is at about 10 seconds. As the shot reaches 15 seconds, I'll start to slowly ramp down the flow. My goal is to evenly ramp down to no flow just as the shot reaches 36 grams to give me a 1:2 brew ratio from my 18-gram dose. So I continue to slowly turn the valve clockwise while keeping an eye on the weight in the cup. It takes a little guesswork, but after doing the ramp a few times, it's fairly easy to judge the speed of the ramp to end with no flow at my target brew ratio. So I pulled a few shots with this profile and tasted them. Compared to extractions without flow modifications, I found them sweeter. And while I sometimes get a bitter note every now and then with this coffee, I had none using this profile. So here's a last look at the graph of that profile. A constant high flow rate for the first half of the extraction, and then a consistent ramp down to 0 flow to finish. Next up, a profile for making coffee shots, a single serve 5 to 6 ounce cup of filter style coffee from your espresso machine. For this, I'll use a medium grind, so I've got a Baratza Virtuoso Plus grinder set to a grind size of 12, and I'll grind for about 6.5 seconds for a 14-gram dose. Load that into my filter basket, and for this, no tamping is needed. The profile for this is very simple. A quarter turn open on the valve, which on my machine gives a flow rate of about 2.5 grams per second. I'll let that run for 70 seconds for a yield of 175 milliliters. That's about 6 ounces. If you see your flow is a little fast or slow, you can make slight adjustments while in progress, as I did here. Now, if you're in a situation where you need to serve both espresso lovers and filter coffee drinkers, with flow control on your machine, you can satisfy both. Flavor can be refined by adjusting things like coffee dose, grind size, and of course the flow rate. With a PID machine, you'll have control of brew temperature as well. So you can go higher for lighter roasts or cooler for darker roasts. Stuff you can't do on most drip coffee makers and definitely not on capsule machines. In my experience, you get a cup that's similar to a pour-over coffee. Flavor from the bean is more pure and you'll get a nice body. If you drink or need to serve both espresso and filter style coffee, this is a method to try. If you have a coffee with those sweet, fruity, or berry flavors, here's a profile to try. This one works best with higher altitude single origin coffees beyond a few weeks from roast. It starts with a gentle flow, and about halfway through you bump up the flow rate for about 5 seconds to dig a little deeper and pull out solids with sweetness as they present. then return to a moderate flow to avoid over extraction to finish the shot. So here's that profile in action. I start with the valve open half a turn for that gentle flow. Again, I'm using an 18-gram dose. I run the gentle flow out to 15 seconds, and then at 15 seconds, I open the valve another half turn and let it run for about 5 seconds, and then return to the flow that I started with. Like the other shots, I'll stop this one at 36 grams in the cup for a 1-to-2 ratio. Using the Orphea coffee again, which honestly is a blend that really I don't expect to get much benefit from this profile. On tasting, it wasn't bad. Not as sweet as the dark roast and blend profile I used earlier, but it did have the nice chocolate touch I like from this coffee. Again, this profile with a 5-second bump in the middle is more appropriate for higher altitude single origin coffees beyond the first few weeks from roast. For my last profile, I'm going to mimic a manual lever shot. They tend to be more syrupy with extra body and sweetness. And with the Maroma's Orphea coffee I'm using, this one turned out to be my favorite. For this profile, I'll start with the valve open one full turn and let that run for 3 seconds, then I'll close the valve. After 5 seconds, I'll open the valve 1.5 turns and then start continuously ramping down the flow. Here it is in action. I open the flow control one full turn, then lift the lever to turn the pump on and run for about 3 seconds before closing the valve and keeping it there for 5 seconds. At 8 seconds, I quickly open the valve 1.5 turns to a high flow rate and then start slowly ramping down the flow. Similar to the dark roast and blend profile I did earlier, I'll keep an eye on the weight in my cup to judge the speed of my ramp down to arrive at my final brew ratio of about 1-to-2. Now, of all the profiles I've used with this coffee, this was my favorite. In my notes, I wrote sweet, smooth, body, excellent. Now, I like the dark roast and blend profile with this coffee, but this lever-like profile was, in my opinion, a little better. So the profiles here are just starting points. I do encourage you to give them a try and share the details of your results in the comments. Let us know what type of coffee you're using and how you're using Flow. The more detail, the better. Give Flow a go, and I think you'll find it's really quite incredible how much you can change the flavor and character of a coffee by working with the flow rate. If you have any questions about Flow or anything coffee, use the comments and I'll get you answers. I'm Mark, thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, do subscribe so you'll know about the latest on everything coffee, brought to you by Whole Latte Love.